Hello and welcome to the Underhive. We are back with some more How to Command the Death Guard. We are continuing the mini-series of looking at the 7 plague companies for a little glow-up, just in mind of the fact that the Votann have come out and they appear to be, at least in my opinion, at a very high power level on release. And this is just a thought experiment to see how we could bring up the Death Guard to that sort of power level, perhaps not even as strong as them, by enhancing the abilities given by each of the Plague Companies. We are now on the 6th Plague Company, the Ferrymen, Lords of the Plague Fleet. So let's dive in and take a look at the mighty 6th. The stratagem here for the Ferrymen is probably the reason you would pick them as it goes. On droning wings, use this in the command phase, select one fetid Virion Ferryman model from the army, select one of the aura abilities belonging to that model. Until the start of the next command phase, add 6 inch to the range of that model's selected aura. The way I've used it myself and the way I've seen it used most frequently by other players is on the Foul Blight Spawn with the Revolting Stench Vat relic, taking that 6 inch to a 12 inch for you don't count as fight first, and you don't count as charging if you move into that aura, meaning that unless they've got a fight last ability to throw out on the target of that charge, that means they're going to hand initiative to that Death Guard unit to attack them before they get to attack on the charge. They would also lose abilities like extra damage for White Scars, extra, I think it's extra to wound on the charge for Blood Angels, things like that. So not only does it give you the initiative in a lot of cases, but it also removes some tasty stuff from certain factions. Now, I don't think there's a lot we can do to this that would either make it weaker, I don't think there's a lot we can do to this that wouldn't make it weaker, or wouldn't make it just too strong. I think as it goes, that is a fine power level. It's very strong as it is, particularly in line with the Foul Blight Spawn Foul Blight Spawn aura, but there are some other auras out there that you might want to extend depending on the given turn and the given opponent that you're up against. One suggestion that I had was to, because given the way it's worded here, I think they could have done more with it. Buzzing clouds of plague flies billow from these warriors, acting as vectors for their unholy gifts. So I was thinking maybe we could pass that aura to an enemy unit, the cloud of flies there going over to that enemy and biting that unit, infecting it with whatever that aura gives. But it would get a little bit weird if we were giving an enemy unit a 6 up feel no pain for your models that are in range of it. That just seems a little bit weird. It works with the Foul Blight Spawn in that you can make their unit a vector for making themselves fight last, well, not fight first, not count as charging. And if we're talking about a large infantry unit, rather than an individual model, that 6 inch coming off every model in the infantry unit would be quite a big range, which I think firstly would be a lot more powerful than a singular 12 inch aura, but also it just feels a little bit weird. So on one hand, whilst I think they could have done more with it, I think there's game reasons why you just wouldn't do that. So as it stands, on droning wings, I think is the reason you pick the Ferryman and is a fine power level as it is. The droning, I think, is a little bit weird here. So the Warlord trait, while an enemy is in contagion range of this unit, at the start of the opponent's movement phase, half their movement. So if they're out of contagion and they walk into it, doesn't matter because their start of their movement phase has already passed. So they're not affected by it this turn. It's only if they start the movement phase in the contagion range. So realistically, that's only going to be happening a few turns into the game. It's not something that's going to be in effect early in the game at all. And realistically, the prime reason you would have this is to stop fast units running away from you, like say Harlequin jet bikes or Eldar jet bikes or even Drakari vehicles and things, or even just faster units like say Demonettes. But the top and bottom of it is that if your opponent's bringing them into contagion range, firstly, they may well just wish to engage with you anyway. And if they're in contagion range, half in the movement distance probably isn't going to be enough to make that charge risky or failable. So he doesn't really do much in terms of stopping the opponent getting to you. And realistically, that's something you want a lot of the time as Death Guard anyway. You want to be meeting them up close. And then in terms of them running away, The likes of those models, like say jet bikes, firstly, they fly, so they're not really bothered about which direction they need to go. And they generally have good movement values, 12-inch or more. So half in that is still enough to get away from you. And they also have auto advances on a lot of those sorts of models. They just advance a flat 6. So if they want to get away from you, they're still going to get away from you. It doesn't really achieve anything. So for me, a couple of suggestions there. Either let's just make it a difficult ground rule that isn't avoided by flying. Just -2 to move, -2 to advance, -2 to charge. That's it. It would still be a bit weak as that, but fine. It is what it is. Otherwise, we could make it you need to pass an unmodified leadership test, so you need to roll higher than your leadership, or you can't move. Now, I think that is potentially a bit too strong, but it does make sense in context of the description. This warlord is surrounded by a cloud of fat plague flies who harass the Death Guard's enemies, eat away at round casings, coolant vats, and fuel containment canisters. So whatever it is that's going to be propelling you, whether it's just the quality of your armor encasing you, allowing you to move, or whether it's some kind of propulsion system on a vehicle, the plague flies are getting in there and making it difficult for you to move in that way. And for me, a leadership test seems the most appropriate thing to roll. So 2 dice, can you roll above your leadership? If you do roll above it, I think above would probably be the least likely outcome. So yeah, can you roll under your leadership on 2 dice? If you do, fine. If you don't, you can't move. Now that might be a bit strong because it would entirely stop the movement from those fast units, but I think having a means to pin down the likes of Harlequins, Eldar, Drakari, and even Tau to a lesser extent isn't a bad thing for the game. At the moment, they're very strong because of that mobility and having a few abilities in the game that, again, would be limited to the Ferryman here. It's not just a general stratagem or something, and you've spent a CP because it's a Warlord trait. I don't think is the worst thing in the world. And again, depending on the situation, you might wish to extend that with a Gift of Plagues, or you might want to extend it with a a foul Flash Outbreak, if I can get the words out. All of those things would make more sense in line with that sort of Warlord trait that really don't make that much sense with the droning as it is. And lastly, the Pheromone Site. So as it stands, it's kind of an upgraded Man Reaper. So it's got the 2 profiles on a Man Reaper like you'd see on the Death Shroud or the Lord of Contagion. The key difference here is that on the Scything profile, the multi-hit, Strength 5, AP 1, Damage 1, you make 3 hit rolls instead of 2. So normally you would make 1, you would just do your normal amount of attacks. With that profile, typically it would be double. This does triple. So it is giving you extra attacks, but it's giving you extra attacks on a profile that just isn't really good into the meta now. There's a lot of Armor of Contempt out there. CSM are very strong. Sisters are very strong as well. There are still many strong Space Marine chapters, though Marines generally aren't that strong. But 1 AP as a whole just isn't really that much into the armies that don't have Armor of Contempt. And at Strength 5, it only really has a use case into infantry. So for me, it just doesn't feel that does enough. I think, given the description here, this grotesquely oversized weapon lops great chunks of armor and flesh from its victims, each lump and gobbet taken as payment for ferrying the victim's soul through the veil and into Nurgle's malignant garden for all eternity. So on the grounds that by killing a model with the Pheromone Site, we see the soul ripped from the body and dragged into the warp by this Ferryman warrior, I think there's cause for this to have a similar ability to the likes of Plaguebringer. Now, I never really use Plaguebringer, but I know some people do, particularly on a Blight Lord, if you're looking to go all swords and go with Putrescent Vitality to bring them up to Strength 6 for that nice wound roll alongside some flails. So I think having the Pheromone Scythe in there to do a similar thing might be a bit of an encroachment on what Plaguebringer does, but I think the Pheromone Scythe, being a Plague Company relic, deserves to have that bit of an edge given how limited it is to be given out, can only go on characters, can't go on the likes of a Death Shroud. So I was thinking we make it just a typical Man Reaper. Just, you know, if you want to go with the scythe profile, you just get double attacks. You don't get triple. And you've still got the -1 on the heavy profile, as is written here, for the cleave attack. Models killed by this relic count as 2 models for morale. So that's like Plaguebringer. But once per game for a single phase, of course, the fight phase, models killed count as 3 models removed for morale phase. Now, for the models that can take this, so this is just the Lord of Contagion in the Codex, but also, I think it's Fethius is his name for the Ferrymen character. So they're only going to have a handful of attacks, and realistically, I find myself using the Cleave, the heavier profile, Strength 7, AP 3, Damage 2, most of the time. It's not flat 3 damage, so it doesn't chew through Terminators super easily. Even if they don't have the Mark of Tzeentch and the Black Rune of Damnation. So even so, I don't think you're going to be getting through tons of high quality infantry with this. You're still only going to be chewing through the sort of mid-tier infantry, the likes of Intercessors and that sort of thing. Strength 4, decent save, 2 wounds. So killing 2 or 3 of those models on the handful of attacks that model would have, I think is reasonable that we'd have either 4 or 6 models counted as running away, or in the turn that you proc it, 6 or 9 count as running away, again, assuming you kill 2 or 3 models. So I think that would make it a lot more appealing. It would essentially guarantee you 1 round where you can proc your Fleeing Vector's leadership failure, and it might encourage people to also take Plaguebringer to really lean into Fleeing Vectors across 2 units that can really up that leadership output. So for me, I think that would bring the Ferrymen up to a reasonable strength. I still run them from time to time just for the stratagem, just on the Blightspawn. But otherwise, I think that would make the Pheromone Site a lot more reasonable to take, especially on the grounds that the morale failure affects Fleeing Vectors as a secondary. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time in the Underhive.